On the last episode, I talked about my history, where I came from, how I grew up, some of the challenges, my health journey, and a little bit of what I want to talk about on this show going forward. For this episode, I want to talk about my vision, both the way out in the future vision and then how that filters back down into my own life right now. For some reason, it's much easier for me to think about very far in the future than it is to think in my own lifetime. So I'm going to start there. I like the idea of 7 generations ahead. So that's where we are. What does that world look like then? When I do that, a few themes show up. First, in this future, my descendants don't ask for permission to live their lives. They don't even have the concept that someone else gets to rule them or tell them how to live. If they heard us talk about how we vote for people to make rules for us or needing licenses to cut hair or go fishing, they would just laugh at us. It would sound insane to them because it is. They understand that as long as they're not harming others, their lives are their own responsibility. What this looks like: they buy and sell what they want, they work with people they actually like, they interact directly with each other like adults. No coercion or force. Second, there's very minimal health care. There aren't endless coaches, protocols, retreats, specialists, supplements, devices, pills, all the stuff. All of that mostly disappears because people understand their bodies and nature. Not perfectly, but well enough. Health isn't mysterious, adversarial, or something you have to outsource to an authority. People aren't trained to think of themselves as broken. They don't spend decades undoing birth trauma, poisoning, fear narratives, or trying to heal layers of damage that never needed to be there in the first place. They just don't have to deal with so much shit. So that's just less to fix. Not only that, but they're resilient and able to adapt to the environment and circumstances. So when things do happen, like injuries and emotional stuff, they know how to navigate that. For me, this isn't only about allopathic medicine causing harm, it's also about how overwhelming and misleading the modern wellness and holistic space is. In this future I desire, most of it simply isn't necessary. Sure, there's still emergency medicine, there are still accidents, we still do some unnatural things that our bodies haven't yet adapted to, like driving cars, flying in planes, sitting in front of screens. But the underlying relationship with the body is different. The body is understood as intelligent, resilient, adaptive, not fragile, not defective, not something to fight, and definitely not something you poison your way back to health. Third, people develop their own principles. They don't inherit belief systems wholesale from experts, religions, political teams, or institutions. They sit with themselves. They decide what they believe. They determine right and wrong for themselves. Adults do model principles to children, and children grow up learning how to form and examine their own principles. People care about internal consistency. They compromise sometimes, but it causes them pain when they do. So they pay attention, reevaluate, and then try to stay in integrity. Fourth, faith exists, but it isn't centralized or complicated. People know God, meaning the sacred, the divine, through their own lived experiences. There's no authority in between. It's personal, experiential, and grounded. Everyone has to come to their own understanding of that, whatever it looks like. Fifth, small local community matters. I have a sticky note on my wall that says, restore the village. In this future, people have nearby people they can count on. Kids aren't raised in isolation. Old people aren't discarded or hidden away. Everyone participates. Sixth, education grows out of that. Families choose what works for them, but they're supported by the village. Kids learn real skills. They learn through experience. They're not sent away to be shaped by strangers, following curriculums written by other strangers. So none of this is perfect. Bad things still happen, but the damage won't be as widespread because it isn't baked into the systems the way it is now. And all of this assumes a baseline of adulthood, self responsibility, self accountability, voluntary relationships, no control of others, a certain level of maturity. So we all have a lot of work to do to get here. And that's the far future vision. When I step back from that, these are the patterns and values I see. First thing is voluntaryism. I really like this definition: the philosophy and practice that all human relationships must be voluntary and consensual. The only exception is self defense of one's person or property. To be clear, this is not a governance or political issue. This is a moral issue. It's immoral for me to rule over you or you to rule over me without consent. Full stop. Every political issue is far downstream and irrelevant because it's all built on immorality. Next is terrain based health. This is the understanding that the body is intelligent and resilient, so most of modern healthcare simply becomes unnecessary. Next are principles. Developing them yourself, questioning them, refining them, and trying to live consistently with them across every scale of life. Principles don't magically change at scale. If I believe it's wrong to rob or kill people when I interact with you directly, then it's still wrong when it's done through a large system. There's no boundary where suddenly voting for someone else to do violence on my behalf becomes moral. You don't get one set of principles for personal life and another for the group. So that's the big picture and the patterns there. Then comes the harder part for me, is kind of bringing it back down into my own life. So this is where I'm defining my goals and how this links to what I want the world to be. I have 3 buckets for now: work, wife, and where. So work first. I want to do meaningful work that aligns with my values and my principles and that creates real wealth for me and my future family. For example, one of my principles is pretty simple: don't kill people. And, self defense is a different conversation. But in general, don't get to harm others. So that means I can't do work that supports killing people, even indirectly. I didn't work in pharma or fake food or fake healthcare directly, but I did work that supported those industries. And those industries do kill people. So if I say I believe in this principle, but then I financially support certain industries through my work, I believe there's a lack of integrity there. Same thing with working for government. Government only enforces rules through force and violence. I don't have a moral right to harm others, so I can't participate in that either if I want to stay consistent. So, what do I want with work? The work I'm building now has to feel clean, or at least cleaner, because unfortunately, this world isn't exactly perfect. But I provide something of value. You see value in it. We exchange voluntarily. It's what I'm working on. I want to support others. I want to share information. I want to think through these things, hopefully get others thinking about them, and eventually create value that people actually want. And part of that is that I love that a lot of us are building new solutions, which I also call the old solutions, because a lot of this is bringing back the things that worked in the past. So I want to participate in that building process, the new solutions: food, healthcare, education, financial, on and on. Most of the things that I described. Second, wife, finding my woman, building our family, sharing my life with someone who shares these values, and getting to be a deep part of someone else's life, working towards our missions, our goals, creating our family, and building wealth and supporting all of that. So, wife, I don't have to convince her of my viewpoints, with my strong opinions. Ideally, she's terrain oriented and voluntarist, or at least very open to it. Wants to build that life together. Maybe homestead, community, which leads me to third, which is where, and this is the location. I want somewhere more rural, but not isolated. I still want to be able to, hop on a plane and travel. Somewhere with a tight knit community. I don't love the phrase like minded, but I would say people who share core values, people who know each other and support each other, and they are actively opting out of the existing systems and building the better solutions. So those are my 3 goals right now: work, wife, and where. They all tie together. And to some degree, they all tie back into the long term vision. That's where I'm going. That's how I'm thinking about things right now. I'll break these pieces down in more detail in future episodes, like the practicalities, the trade offs, how the transition actually works, because this is going to be a really long transition and there's a lot of work to do. If this way of thinking and these values resonate, subscribe wherever you're listening, share the show, leave a review, do all the podcast things, and I'll see you next time.